That was beautiful. I thought I had this under control till those guys came through with the bagpipes and the police officers. I'm welcome you all here tonight. Glad to see you. I'm Glenn Janda. I'm Paul's dad. Funny enough, not funny, but 57 years ago today, Paul was born. And his mom said, okay, it's time to go to the hospital. And we got in the car and went to the hospital. It was only 5 blocks. Got to the hospital, they sent me in to do paperwork, and they sent her in to get ready to have the baby. By the time I did the paperwork and went and found her, she was already in the delivery room. Paul was ready and wasn't waiting. On behalf of the Janda family, we welcome you all here tonight for showing your love and respect for Paul. Our family would like to also thank the Provo police officers for all they've done to make this service meaningful and worthwhile. He considered you officers his brothers and sisters. He considered you family. He loved working, being a police officer. I'm glad I made notes. I thought I could do this. Our family would like to also welcome the Provo Police Department for, like to thank Katie Smith and Captain Patrick for their tireless support in helping the family with all the logistics and everything that needed to make this a service a reality. We'll forever appreciate that. I would also like to thank Mike Bastian. I don't know if I said that right, Mike, so if I didn't, who was Paul's friend, one of his friends, and for all the things he did to support Paul in his long 14 months almost of cancer. I'd also like to thank Paul's brother, Brian. It was easy for us to visit him fairly frequently because we lived in Cache Valley, so it wasn't tough to drive down and spend some time with him. But Brian lived in Virginia, and he'd come down at least, I think, a couple of times a month at least to visit Paul and spend the weekend with him, and he did that the whole time that he was suffering, or he had the cancer. And Brian's tirelessly worked for the details with the police department and others to make this happen tonight. Paul was a little concerned about all the work that was going into making this memorable. He said probably all of will come will be the family, the police officers, and maybe some friends. Well, Paul, if you're looking down, take a look at this. And this is only part of them. The rest are, my understanding is, are listening in the police station. I want to thank Casey for her unwavering support of Paul through all this, from the beginning to the end. Again, thank you all for attending. I just want to let you know that after the services, if you want to share stories about Paul or visit, I understand we have this building till later this evening, so you can take some time to do that. Thank you again. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Reverend Jackson.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we have come here tonight with heavy hearts. But we know that in some of our most difficult and darkest hours that we can reach to you, and you're able to bring comfort and strength in the midst of some of life's most difficult and challenging moments. We're reminded of the words of the psalmist David, who said, "When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I, for you are my strength and my refuge, and I long to dwell in your wings." Lord, may we sense your comfort, your covering, and your presence today. You know each one of us personally, you created us, and you know what each one of us needs tonight. So God, please customize for each person here tonight your strength and your touch, we pray. In the name of Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen. I always knew something was going on between Mike Bastian and Paul Janda, because whenever either one of them was in trouble, the other one always called me to help them. And when they're struggling with things, I'd always get the call. And so, as was tradition in our relationship, Mike called me and said, "Dean, have you heard about Paul?" And I said, "No, I hadn't heard." So I gave him a call to chat with Paul. Most people don't like memorials. We don't like funerals, partly because they're sad, partly because they make us really aware of our own mortality. I've been dealing and working with people in death most of my career, as a pastor, as a chaplain, as a coroner, as a hospice chaplain, and for the last 12 years, serving as the deputy executive director for the Cold Case Foundation with my good friend, Greg Cooper. Greg and I were scheduled this week to be out of town, but I had made a promise to Paul. I said, whenever it is, I'll make sure I'm in town. Last year, he told me, "I don't know, Dean, I might not make it," and I spent 3 weeks in Japan, and I thought, holy cow, that's going to be a long trip back. But he pulled through and has made it to this point. Coop sends his thoughts and prayers, and he sent this to me. He said, "I remember Paul with a great personality and a sense of humor in both good and difficult times, and among the sincere, caring individuals in his profession. A true peace officer who could use his pleasing personality to de-escalate a situation, and a personality. He will sorely be missed among his friends and is an example to his peers." Now, while I'm not going to stand here this evening and tell you I've seen everything, I've seen a lot, and I've observed a lot. And I sometimes am reminded that I'm a lot older than when I started. But I want to share with you just a couple of things that I've kind of seen as good elements to kind of set the stage for you this evening, and some of the things that are going to be shared with you. What are the elements of a good memorial? It's a time to reflect on the things that he taught us about living through his good choices and some of his mistakes. It's a time to laugh. Ecclesiastes 3 says that there is a time for everything: a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to uproot, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance. It's a time to reject some of the obstacles in our own lives that keep us from God's plan for us. It's a time to recommit our lives to be all that God has created us to be, and it's a time to rest in the comforting presence of God. A good memorial is a time, I think, to laugh, and especially if you knew Paul Janda, somebody before they leave here tonight better laugh at least once. Now, if you're not sure whether or not it's appropriate to laugh at something, just say to yourself, what would Paul do? he would laugh. Not only that, he probably would have some additional comments that would be shared with those sitting right by him that they could also enjoy, that would be another comment on what was actually happening. Paul asked that I take a moment at this point to thank the first and second responders for being here tonight. I'll let that sink in for a moment. He said it's been a privilege to serve beside you over the years, and he said thank them for their tireless and selfless service. I couldn't help but kind of smile when I realized that Paul died on Friday the 13th. I don't know if there's a lot of humor in that, but if anybody could find it, it would be Paul. His dad already mentioned that he didn't think very many people would come. I was talking to Mike last week and talking about how many people, and somebody said 100 people maybe, and I said, start again. I said, there's going to be a lot of people at this event because of who Paul is. And then I realized that the memorial today is on Paul's birthday. And I thought, I could hear Paul saying to all of us, now you all decide to make a big deal about me on this birthday. This next thought I want to share with you is actually a text that I got from Paul, but I do have a disclaimer. It's my trigger alert. If you take issue with this text, you can take it up with Paul. Paul sent me this a few weeks ago, and here's what he said. He said, there is actually some good in having a terminal illness and knowing that you're going to die. I've spent a lot of quality time with my family and friends. I was able to take all of the things that I wanted to get done before I go. I only have 2 things left. I have to get my funeral stuff taken care of, and I have to finish my eulogy. And then I'm set to go. I think I've entered a different stage of this cancer. The fatigue is so bad. I seriously can't do anything that is even slightly physical. Now I know what it's like to be a woman. I take it you knew Paul. I came to Provo in 1991, and it took almost 4 or 5 years before I was able to get on with the Provo Police Department as their chaplain. And Greg was gracious enough to see some possible potential in me and gave me that opportunity. Now, I wasn't going to share who this was about, but I spoke to him tonight when I got here, and I've gotten his permission, so I'm going to use names tonight. I wasn't planning to, I was just going to tell the story. But it'll be a lot funnier if you know who they are. So after I'd been appointed chaplain, I got down to the police department. My first ride-along officially as the chaplain of the Provo Police Department. And I don't know if it's the luck of the draw, what the reason, but I ended up with Paul Janda. So we got in the car and began to talk, and he figured out who I was and what I was, and he said, oh, this is gonna be great. I said, well, what's up? He said, well, I got to tell you. He said, last week, he said, Fergie set me up with a ride-along. He didn't tell me he was a bishop. So he said, I got out there, said a few things that I probably normally wouldn't have, and I was so embarrassed. He says, we're getting Fergie tonight. Okay. So as the night went on, he made arrangements, and down here at the Maverick on South University Avenue, he made arrangements for Fergie to show up in his unmarked vehicle. He and Stan were in the car side by side, and we pulled up and got it to where the 2 drivers' windows, how cops like to do, side by side, and they began to talk back and forth, and I could tell that Janda was just waiting for for a good, spicy, good word to come out of Fergie's mouth. And sure enough, it did. I'll let him tell you what he might have said. But as soon as he did, Janda got the funniest look on his face, and he said, Fergie, have you met the chaplain? To which Fergie said, yeah, right. And then he looked over at me and said, what the blankety blank do you do? And I said, I'm the chaplain. The funny part of that story is that for months, when I would run into Fergie, he was always embarrassed. And I told him, I said, dude, you don't have to be embarrassed. I worked in the coroner's office. I've been there. Probably used some of the same words myself over time. So I said, you don't have anything to be embarrassed about. But it was one of Janda's favorite stories. He thought that was the greatest thing. I'm going to conclude with just a couple of thoughts. When Paul was faced with his own mortality, he called me. And he said, what are my options? Now, I've always had an interesting position because what happens is that we all have a public life. It's the life everybody sees. We have a private life that we let those closest into with. But believe it or not, we all have a secret life. And that's where some of our fears, some of our thoughts, unfortunately for some, our actions take place. And Paul wanted to know some things that were going on in his mind and his secret life. See, Paul had a fear. His fear was that maybe he hadn't done enough for God to accept him. And I told him, I said, you know, the cool thing about God is that he's in the business of accepting us the way we are, not the way others or we think we should be. Paul said, yeah, but Dean, some of the stuff, you know, the things we do in our life. I said, well, there's a passage of scripture that I love. It's Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 10. It says this, the heart is deceitful above all else. Who can understand it? I, the Lord God, search the heart and the mind to reward according to one's deeds and conduct. I said, Paul, that's a double-edged sword. Because what it says is it says that you can do everything right. You can be the world's most righteous man in their eyes. And God says, but wait, I'm looking at your heart. And I know why you did what you did. But I said, the good part is you can mess a lot of things up in life. But God says, I know. But I see your heart. I know who you truly are. I made you. I love you. And I want to be with you. A friend of mine recently said, we spend so much of our time feeling like we're auditioning for likes and love. Well, we need to stop trying to earn God's love. God loves us. He likes us. And he accepts us just the way we are. See, God's grace and his favor are not based upon our faithfulness. They're based upon his faithfulness to who he is and what he said he would do. I was asked to share this quick story because I shared it at the bike ride last year because it ties in with what I've been sharing about Paul. There's a great story in the book of Luke. It's the story of Jesus who was tired. They were heading over to the other side of the lake. So he went to the bottom of the boat and went to sleep. And as they were crossing over to the other side, a horrible storm came up. It was an awful storm. It was so bad that the disciples thought they were going to all drown. And finally, in the middle of this crisis, they woke Jesus up. They said, Master, Master, we're going to sink. And here's what it says. It says, he got up and he rebuked the wind and the raging waters, and the storm subsided, and all was calm. And then he asked, where is your faith? We read that and we think that Jesus was dissing them for not having faith. I don't think that's what he was saying. We all have faith. We believe in something. What Jesus was saying was, is your faith in me, or is your faith in the storm? And I said to Paul one day, I said, Paul, you get a choice. I said, I don't know why things happen the way they do. I don't understand it. There's a lot of people that blame God and say, well, I don't want anything to do with him. But I said, here's what I know. I know that bad things happen to good and bad people alike. And what I do know is we get to choose where our faith is. We can either put it in the storm, in his case, the storm of cancer, or you can put it in God and know that God will walk with you, and in some of those darkest moments, he will be with you. Personally, I'm excited to have a relationship with a God who's willing to go through things with me, not just remove them from my life. Paul told me this. He said, unfortunately, you're only remembered for the funny things that you do and the mistakes that you make. I said, well, I'm going to always remember you as a compassionate man who served the community that God had given you the opportunity to be law enforcement in. And he told me this story. He said, Dean, I was out one night, it was 1 o'clock in the morning. And he said, I was down by the Provo River, and he said, I saw a young man sitting on the edge of the river, and I could tell from the smell and what I saw, he was smoking a joint. So he said, I pulled my car over, I walked up to him, I sat down next to him, and I just started to talk. See where he was at, what was going on in his life, the things that maybe he was struggling with. He said, Dean, we talked for over an hour. He said, when we got all done, I looked at him and I said, look, this stuff's not going to solve your problem. I'm not going to write you a ticket. I'm not going to take you in. But you need to get your life straight. You need to do it right. You might be sitting here tonight and say, well, that's a great story. Well, I liked Paul Harvey when I was a kid growing up, so let me tell you the rest of the story. Paul said a few months ago on Facebook he got an email or a message from a young man who said, you probably don't know who I am, but he said, I've seen on Facebook all that you're going through and the struggles that you're facing. And I want to tell you that I'm the young man that you sat down next to at 1 o'clock in the morning, that you caught smoking a joint, and you didn't take me in, you didn't arrest me, you just gave me some wonderful insights for life. He said, here's the part of the story you didn't know. When I sat down that night on the edge of that river with that joint, my plan was to smoke the joint and take my life. But today, I'm married, I have a great job, I have a great family, and I just want to thank you. Police officers are always asked, have you ever taken a life? Have you ever saved a life? I've spent enough hours with Janda in the car and watched how he interacts with the public and people in very difficult situations. My guess is that story could be repeated over and over and over again. Paul knew he wasn't perfect, and he knew that everyone has a story if we just take time to listen. He asked me to conclude my remarks, and so I will, with the policeman's prayer to St. Michael. This is actually Reverend Patrick Gallagher's version of it, but I think it probably embraces the thought and the feelings that meant so much to Paul. St. Michael, heaven's glorious commissioner of police, who once so neatly and successfully cleared God's premises of all of its undesirables, Look with kind and professional eyes on your earthly force. Give us cool heads, stout hearts, hard punches, an uncanny flair for investigation and wise judgment. Make us the terror of burglars, the friend of children and law-abiding citizens, kind to strangers, polite to boors, strict with lawbreakers, and impervious to temptation. In troubles and riots, give us sheer muscle without temper. At the police count, give us love for truth and evidence without any thought of self. You know, St. Michael, from your own experience with the devil, that the policeman's lot on earth is not always a happy one, but your sense of duty that so pleased God, your hard knocks so surprised the devil, and your angelic self-control gives us inspiration. Make us loyal to the law of God as we are particular about the law of the land. And when we lay down our nightsticks, enroll us in your heavenly force, where we will be as proud to guard the throne of God as we've been to guard the city of all the people. Amen.
Good evening, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Josh Janda, and I have the privilege of being Paul's son. Standing here today is one of the hardest things I've had to do, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to share just a little bit of who my father was and the incredible legacy he leaves behind. He really wanted to write his own eulogy and record him reciting it. Unfortunately, he didn't get that chance before he passed. He was unable to finish writing his eulogy. I found a copy he'd been working on, of which I will read to you now, followed by some words of my own. Again, please bear with me as I try to get through this, keeping in mind the first portion is read as Paul had written. Dang! If you're hearing this, I guess I'm history. Well, I tried to make this quick. I initially wrote what I thought was about half of my eulogy, but when I read it, it had taken me 45 minutes to read. I know you yahoos don't want to listen to me for an hour and a half, so I decided this literary masterpiece would just contain a little bit about my life. I had initially addressed each member of my family, which took quite some time. Then I realized that I have had the last year to show and express to them how I feel about them. I have 3 sons who are my best friends. I'm definitely not ready to leave them. They're probably tired of me trying to squeeze 10 years of fatherly advice into a few months. I've had an amazing family that I wouldn't give up for anything. I also felt like I had to address each individual friend or other person that I have cared about. Turns out I care about a whole bunch of people. I think they know how I feel about them. Enough about other people, let's talk about me. Man, I could just picture my funeral. Some people are crying because I owe them money. Some people are Some people are laughing because they owe me money. But most importantly, I can picture my casket, beautifully put on display, stained and polished mahogany wood, decorative gold overlay and Art Deco style, brass handles. The interior was made of embossed cotton velvet with a unique weave style texture, which is specially designed for an unmatched level of support and comfort. I know, wow, right? Nothing but the best. Wait a minute. Those cheap kids of mine better not have had me roasted and put in some cheap container. They better not have put me in some cheap container they bought used on KSL. If they did and it smells like marijuana, it's okay. I have a medical marijuana card. Now, if my kids did do that, this would probably be a good time to let them know I was just joking about having life insurance. Sorry, boys. Well, I'm going to have to say some quick words about my cancer and then not mention it again. My type of cancer is called peritoneal cancer. It's a very rare cancer and it starts in the abdomen. They don't know what causes it either. The doc told me that the cancer usually affects women, and it's even rare for men to get it. Cancer made me feel like garbage all the time. Sometimes it was painful, sometimes uncomfortable, but most times it just felt like my body was rotting on the inside. It was a terrible feeling. The worst part was the fatigue. In a rating from 1 to 1,000, my energy level at times was a 1. It was difficult to even leave my house. Unfortunately, I had to blow off a lot of friends who would invite me out. I'm sorry, guys. I always knew that I would die, but I'd hoped that I would be a lot older. I would have preferred to have died doing something heroic by saving someone on the job. I even would have preferred falling from the sky while flying my powered parachute. Dying of cancer makes me a big goober. The hardest part for me was that no one had ever survived this type of cancer. I couldn't do anything to fight it other than just wait for the day the big guy called me upstairs, decided it was my time. After being misdiagnosed, I spent 4 months continuing to work in total pain. It totally affected my arrest stats for sure. Oh well, it's about time someone else to be a stat leader for a change. Since being correctly diagnosed, I just feel like my insides were slowly rotting. And regardless how much I ate, I still lost weight. At times I blew off friends and family who wanted to meet with me because even though I tried not to let it show, I felt horrible. The feeling was indescribable. The worst part was knowing that there was no future for me. I'd see a vehicle and think, man, I'd like to buy that and fix it up, restore it. I couldn't buy and sell cars. I died of cancer. I quit opening emails from Harbor Freight to see what new tools I needed. I wanted to make all sorts of changes to my home. I wanted to learn how to do so many new things. But I was stuck with what I had already accomplished, like my 550 square foot mansion and my 2001 Chevy truck with a peeling clear coat. That's about what I felt like I had accomplished. I always connected success with finances. I made mistakes because of the belief that I was less than because I wasn't financially successful. I finally realized what was important and what was just stupid waste of time. It's amazing how I did stupid things that won't matter later in life that took time away from spending quality time with people I care about. Don't do this. You will regret it someday. My love for family and people I care about intensified greatly. Realizing how I lived my life, I wish I could go back and get a do-over. Most of my existence would be spent doing things with my kids, one-on-one, outings with each of my kids. Eating dinner at the dinner table with everyone there, teaching my kids how to work on cars. I could go on all day. However, I realized that even while dying from cancer, my life was much better than a lot of people's lives. I actually had a very good life. I surrounded myself around some freaking awesome people I would seriously do anything for. So let me tell you a little bit about me. For those of you who don't know me very well, my name is Paul Janda. He, him. I was born in Provo because my parents were Zoobies. I grew up in Colorado, then California. I moved back to the land of Zion and split my high school days between California and Utah. I married at the ripe age of barely 17. I didn't even have a driver's license or a job, but I did have a full head of hair that came down to my shoulders. I was gorgeous. Now, my wife Liz was 15. Uh-oh. USVU guys are doing the math. Can you say statute of limitations? Anyway, we had a miracle baby 4 months later. We were married for 23 years. Imagine 23 years of being able to be with me all the time, hearing my hilarious jokes and stories. I know, right? Lucky. Liz, my apologies for any and all things I did wrong as a husband. I can't think of any off the top of my head. But I'm sure there was plenty. No, but in all seriousness, I am sorry. We ended up with 3 amazing sons. It seems like for the first 5 or so years, I worked 3 to 4 jobs to make enough to survive. I would sometimes fall asleep at work. And no, I'm not talking about at the PD. We all did that. I quickly realized that I had to provide for a family outside of just a paycheck. I checked into several careers. I decided to become a police officer for really no other reason than as it required little schooling, with great pay, benefits, and retirement. Now don't get me wrong, I complained about all that after I was hired. I knew nothing about police work and just got lucky that I was good at it. Maybe the best in the state, or even the country. But I'm not here to boast about myself. Most of you don't know that I'm actually somewhat educated. After almost completing the 11th grade, I left high school to concentrate on higher learning, where I undertook several hours of study to graduate within the top 93 percentile in the often undervalued GED program. I believe obtaining this certificate it would be comparable to obtaining a law degree at BYU. This means that if 20 people showed up to this event, I'd be dumber than only 18.6 of you. Now, I don't know which 93% of you are less intelligent than I. I don't judge. But if my buddy Mike Bastian is here, it should be pretty obvious on that one. Love you, Mikey. I have several hobbies. Bass fishing was my main love. I have lived most of my life with a separate medical issue where I had non-cancerous tumor lipomas, growths all over my body. When I was fishing, I didn't feel anything. So I skipped a part. It said this made me extremely uncomfortable and in pain 24/7. But when I was fishing, I didn't feel anything. All my pain, stress, and memories of anything police-related that I didn't want in my mind were gone. I loved working on cars and anything with a motor. I didn't read books. I found out better to wait until the movie came out. I listened to contemporary Christian music, which probably surprises a lot of you. But that music was relaxing for me. I loved talking politics and was correct in anything I argued. I also loved my job, which I will talk about now. I was hired at the Provo Police Department in 1993. To put that year into perspective, besides being the year that created my heroes, Beavis and Butthead, this is the year that Cypress Hill came out with that awesome song, Insane in the Membrane. For those of you who recognize this song, it'll be stuck in your head all day. You're welcome. I hope that song didn't correlate to my decision of becoming a police officer. Anyway, I retired after 22 years. I left for a year, worked with some awesome dudes at the Justice Court, and then came back to Provo. I continued working until cancer turned my extremely muscular body into a Mr. Burns look-alike. After getting cancer, I decided to take the most relaxing retirement available, obviously, as you can see. I had a hard time putting this together as I wanted to say something to every person that I loved or cared about, but realized that I had to generalize things a bit or we would be here forever. I hope that every person who has been close to me knows how I feel about them. I love you all. I've been close to some of the best people out there. Now to my sons, the most important people in my life. I could take the next 10 hours telling stories about each of you. I can't even come close to being able to put into words how much I love you guys. My love for you guys became so much stronger after I knew I wasn't going to be around long. Each one of you have your own qualities that make you amazing people. I couldn't ask for better sons. If I wasn't your father, I'd want to be your friend. Unfortunately, you all inherited my sometimes inappropriate yet hilarious sense of humor. Just know that when you're 50 years old and you're wondering when you're ever going to grow up and act your age, don't. It's a waste of time. I can tell you right now from experience, it's not going to happen. Just so you know, your balding heads you inherited from your mom's side of the family. Google it, it's true. Not my fault. I'm proud to call myself your father. I wasn't ready to leave you guys. I had so many plans for the things I would do with you guys when I finally retired. I spent most of the time while I've been sick thinking about you guys. I remembered all stories you'd tell me about, the things that I didn't know about that you did when you were young, now that you couldn't get in trouble by me for them. I swear I remembered everything about each of you since you were little. I've had to admit that I cried a lot to myself. This cancer garbage was not in my plans. Not being able to do things with you because I wasn't feeling good, not being able to do certain things with you because I couldn't, not being able to go visit my oldest son in Louisiana absolutely killed me. I tried to hide it when I wasn't feeling good, but couldn't always do it. I loved having you all here together at the same time when I mistakenly felt I was down to my last few days. Just having you here at the same time meant the world to me. I love that you all have a great sense of empathy and sympathy for others, except while driving. Your level of road rage is unmatched. I hope to be able to watch you guys continue to be the successful, great men that you are. I know that I will be with you forever. I don't really know what is going to happen to me now or where I'm going. I mean, really, what's going to happen to me? Where am I going? I've had the honor from other relationships to have other kids that I think of as my own. I want them all to know that I love them very much. I hope that each of you have the most amazing life. I hope that I was a positive person in your lives. My grandkids. I have 5 grandchildren. I love them all. It's amazing when you think about how much you love your kids, and then times that by 1,000 for your grandkids. Everything they do is cute or funny or cool. It's awesome to go visit a busy house full of kid noises, but be able to return home to absolute quiet. Part-time loving is the best. Unfortunately, they won't be able to say anymore, maybe my grandpa will buy it for me. My answer was always yes to them. I hope my grandkids know what great parents they have and to stay close to them forever. I love you guys. To my hospital family, I loved working with you guys at the emergency room. We had some fun times. What a great bunch of friends. It wasn't even like working when I was there. I want to thank them for the book of memories that they made for me. One of the memories that was pointed out was when a car sped to the door of the hospital. The guy's wife was in labor. A nurse actually birthed the baby in the front passenger seat It was cool to see these people work together. Once they removed the mom and baby, the entire passenger area was absolutely covered in blood and other birth-related stuff. I guess I quietly said to one of the nurses that they are never going to be able to sell that car again. I thought about that vehicle all shift, wondering what kind of deal I could get for it. I can't help it. I'm kind of a jerk like that. As many of you know, I've been referred to and have referred to myself as Brother Janda. I think a lot of you don't know that that actually all started from a call when I was a pretty new officer, so I'll tell you about it. I dealt several times with a local guy who was about 6'7", huge and very mentally ill. He was familiar with me and I him. He would just call me Janda. I would call him Big Guy. I never had a problem with him. I had the opportunity to take him home once and actually went inside of his home. His house was filled with pictures and statues of Jesus. His entire wall was filled with handwritten scriptures. That's when I realized that he was somewhat of a Jesus freak. Forgive me, Lord, for using the name Jesus freak. Amen. Anyway, we used to deal with him all the time. He wasn't necessarily a troublemaker. However, sometimes he would act very strange in public when he was off of his medication, and people would call the police on him. One day, Big Guy took a couple rocks, causing damage to the storefront glass of a bank, so the manager called the police. Big Guy had already left, and officers were looking for him to arrest him for damaging the property. An officer located him, and all other officers responded to that location. When I got there, several officers were surrounding Big Guy, preparing to take him into custody. Big Guy was demonstrating that he was definitely ready and willing to fight. Knowing that Big Guy was deeply religious, I took the opportunity to de-escalate the situation. I walked in front of the officers with my arms stretched out and said, "I am the Lord, thy Son Jesus Christ. I have been called here to send you on a mission. God commands you go to the Utah County Jail and spread the word. Spread the word of God to inmates." Big Guy stopped and paused for a minute, relaxed, then turned around and put his hands behind his back for handcuffing. When I was leaving, one of the officers joked about how he didn't know I was so Christ-like and said, "Good job, Brother Janda." And that just stuck. This is the only time in my career that I may have acted unprofessional or goofed off while on duty. I've been overwhelmed with offers to help me with anything that I might need, but one person went above and beyond. I spoke to Courtney Manwaring, who regularly texts me a 3125 code 4 check, and told me that her 4-year-old son would mention me in his nightly prayers. I made the mistake of telling Courtney that I had just started a new form of chemo, in which my doctor told me that one of the biggest side effects was ED. Extreme diarrhea. For your information, I did not suffer this side effect. However, later that evening, I received a voice recording via text from Courtney's young son, Banks. This is the message that he left for me.
And then start praying that you don't poop your pants. Love you, Janda. And then start praying that you don't poop your pants. Love you, Janda.
Now, if you couldn't understand what he said, I'm going to start praying that you don't poop your pants. Love you, Janda. I love you too, little man. Thank you, Courtney, for being such an amazing person, friend, and mom. I'll be giving your dad a huge hug for you. And that must have been where he fell asleep, because he didn't end it after that. So I'm going to just say a few things. Dad was many things to many people: a friend, a protector, a confidant, a mentor. But to me, he was simply Dad. Growing up, I saw firsthand the kind of man he was: kind-hearted, fiercely intelligent, and yes, sarcastic as all get out. He had an incredible ability to always make you laugh, even when life wasn't going your way. But more than that, he had this unwavering sense of calm. No matter how chaotic things got, Dad could always see through the mess and find out a way to make you feel like everything would be okay. As a police officer, he was respected and admired. That was him. As a police officer, he was respected and admired by everyone who knew him. He wore the badge with pride. But what made him stand out was the way he treated people. Whether he was dealing with a fellow officer, a community member, or someone in trouble. Dad had a way of looking past the surface and seeing the person underneath, recognizing that everyone has their own struggles, their own story. He never judged, and he always tried to help, often putting the needs of others ahead of his own. I can't tell you how many times I saw him go out of his way to help someone, a stranger, a neighbor, or even just someone down on their luck. He never did it for recognition. He did it because that's who he was. He believed that being a good man was more important than being a good cop. And to him, the two were inseparable. Dad had this incredible sense of balance. He could be tough when the situation called for it, but he also had the biggest heart. He would tell me, "Son, everyone deserves respect. You never know what they're going through." He lived by those words. It didn't matter if someone was having the worst day of their life. Dad treated them with dignity, kindness, and a bit of that dry humor that always seemed to lighten the mood. There's one thing that has always stood out to me about Dad, and that's how selfless he was. He never hesitated to help someone, even when it meant sacrificing his own time, his own comfort, or even his own well-being. He didn't do this his job. He embodied what it means to be compassionate, to give without expecting anything in return. To the world, Dad was a hero in uniform. To me, he was a hero long before he ever put on that badge. He taught me what it meant to be a man, not by telling me, but by showing me every single day. He taught me that real strength comes from kindness, that respect is something you give freely, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be there for somebody who needs you. It's hard to imagine a life without him. And I don't know if it'll ever quite be the same. But I also know the lessons he taught me, the examples that he set, will stay with me forever. He wasn't perfect. None of us are. But he was good. He was so good. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to live up to the man he was. Dad, I'll miss your laugh, your advice, and even those sarcastic comments that always kept me on my toes. But most of all, I'll miss your presence, knowing that no matter what, you're always there for me. I'll carry your memory with me every day, and I'll do my best to live in a way that would make you proud. Thank you for being my father, for being my role model, and for showing me what it means to live a life full of integrity, love, and service. I love you, Dad, and I'll never forget everything you gave me and everyone else whose lives you've touched. Rest easy, Dad. You've earned it. Thank you.
Would anybody like to stand up and kind of stretch? And I know your butts have got to be getting sore. If you want to, just stand up and stretch, and it's okay. So, my name is Mike Bastian. I've been friends with Paul for 30 years and probably best friends for 30 years. We hit it off. He was a year on when I started and fresh out of FTO, and we became friends and started hanging out together on and off duty. We went on the same calls. We backed each other every day. We were on graves most of the time, probably all the time. And we had countless hours of nights watching the 7-Eleven and predicting who had warrants and who had drugs. And Paul was a master at knowing who had warrants and drugs. And I have a lot of funny stories, but I can't spend all that time. In fact, I have 12.75 minutes allotted to me. So I'll just tell you a few, and then I want to share something. So first off, Happy birthday, Paul. That was good timing. Friday the 13th, and now on your birthday? Genius. So, Paul asked me to share with you a story, and he told me the story a couple times so I'd get it right, and he showed me how to illustrate the story. So I want to apologize right now to all of you, and you can cover up your kids' ears if you want. So, when Paul was a young married man, married to beautiful young Liz, I guess they lived in an apartment, and a lot of you already know this story because I see you laughing. He went to take a shower, and he just had his bathrobe on, and he saw Liz sitting on the couch looking at the paper. The newspaper is a thing that we used to have. We'd look at it, ads. So she's looking at the paper on the couch, and he just glanced at her and took a shower. And then, after a shower, he saw that she was still sitting there, and so he thought, oh, I'll do a little dance. So he took his towel off, and he got in front of Liz and started. And maybe you can tell what's going on. But then he heard Liz laughing, but not from the couch. And he looked down, and there was his mother-in-law. That's probably our favorite story. Well, there's one more. They were living in Orem, and Liz was a great cook, and she had made a hot dinner, and they decided to go downstairs. I think they got a big screen that was fairly new or something, and they're going to go downstairs and watch TV, and they had TV trays, and Paul just got handed his, and Liz went up to get hers, and she came down the stairs and was about to sit down, and then whoosh, flipped all the trays all over the room, and food went everywhere, and it was hot, and Paul was shocked and looked at her like, what? And she said, oh, I thought you were going to scare me. I'll be driving somewhere and think of that, and I'll just laugh. So I don't have to tell you how much how meaningful it was to have my best friend. When he got sick, when it looked like, when we knew he wasn't going to make it, I wrote him a letter, and I was just going to tell funny stories the whole time, but that would take too long, and plus we're doing that afterwards. And but I really want all of you to get a sense of how much he meant to me. He really meant a lot to me. So I wrote him this. Paul, how can this be? I feel like calling out 1033 on the radio. Do you have any idea how much you have helped me? Do you understand that I wouldn't have made it through all of the storms in my life? All of the family problems, all the divorces, all the work problems, all the relationships, etc.? You were always on my side, and you always gave a shit. Sorry. I don't know anyone personally who has done more for people than you. Honestly, you gave thousands of dollars and thousands of hours. You gave hundreds of presents to motel kids. Some are here. Trucks full of presents. You gave and you gave. And you gave people their dignity back after others had destroyed it. You showed people compassion in the best possible way, with humor. You opened your home to people, and you fed people. And not many people knew you were doing all of this because it was never for show. When we first met on a call, I never forgot it. It was 100 South, 531 West. It was November of 1994 at a fourplex. It was an underage drinking party, and we messed with them. I asked for backup, and you responded. I didn't realize that you would be my backup for the next 30 years. I was just off FDO. You backed me not only on that call, but with the police department, where at first I didn't fit in. You made such a difference for me then and now. I know that you know that I'm pleading with God to let you stay in this world. The world that you have mastered. It's true, you have mastered this world, and you have predicted nearly everything that has come to be. We talked about this day like 30 years ago. We talked about that we promised that we would speak at each other's funeral 30 years ago. And we talked about death a lot, because we're kind of in the death business, I guess. And he predicted a lot. You have nearly predicted everything that has come to be, not only for yourself, but for your family, including Casey. Do you know how good you are? Do you do good things with absolutely no agenda? Not for heaven, not for praise, not for benefit. That's as good as a person can possibly be. You feel guilty for what you haven't done, though rich men pale in comparison for all that you've done and all that you've given. If this life was a TV show, Paul, almost done.
As usual, I am at a loss to help you. I hope you've had enjoyed the times that we goofed around half as much as I have. The fishing, motorcycling, eating at Village Inn and at Denny's, the thousands of calls. Life has been so much better with you around. A glance could be completely understood from across the room. And talking always resulted in laughter. Do you know how many thousands of times you made me laugh hysterically? You're the best cop I have ever known because you made as much effort into proving people innocent as proving people guilty. You never denied the whack, and you worked for the victims and the underdogs. Inside joke. The laughter, the camaraderie, the antics, and the fun were most of the best times of my life. I'm glad that I have those memories. I don't want it to end, no matter how much pain you have to endure. That was a joke. Nothing I write seems to cut it. How can I put in words what means so very much inside? I can only think of 1033. God, 1033. If this is it, I promise the pain will never leave me. I won't let it. I'll be along shortly and I'll be looking for you. Anyone who ever knows me will know you. You're my best friend. I don't think I've ever thanked you for all that you have done for me. Thank you. You're my brother. And as gay as it may sound, I love you so much.
Sorry, everyone. I just need just a second to let the air clear just a little bit. It's really hard to follow up with a powerhouse like Mike, a man that my dad respected more than anything. You know, I would much prefer to follow up with somebody that ends with an accidental fart, but Mike's too good of a man for that. So thanks, Mike. So I'm here today to talk about my father, Pops, the most influential and wise man that I've ever met in my life. As I sit here right now, I think of what a monumental task it is to speak about somebody so great. I've never had a problem speaking in front of people. I'm a little bit nervous right now. So I ask myself, what would Pops do? What advice would he give me right now? And I draw back to a memory when I was in 9th grade. I went to him and I said, Dad, I don't know what to do. I'm pretty worried. So there's a kid at school. He's 6 foot tall and 275 pounds. He's going to beat the brakes off of me. What do I do? Pop says, well, if he wants to fight, you're going to have to fight him, but you can't back down, even if you lose. He said, but I'll tell you what you do. He said, you square up with him, you stare at him straight in the eyes, and you imagine that he has snow white skin and he's covered with Disney tattoos. and he has a bright red curly perm and acne all over his face, big Coke bottle glasses, and that he talks with a lisp. People that talk with lisps hit hard. I'd like to read something by a retired military commander named Lieutenant Colonel David Grosso that I think speaks well upon my father. He writes, "If you have no capacity for violence, then you are a healthy, productive citizen, a sheep. If you have the capacity for violence and no empathy for your fellow citizens, then you have defined an aggressive sociopath, a wolf. But what if you have the capacity for violence and a deep love for your fellow citizens? Then you are a sheepdog, a warrior, someone who is walking the hero's path, someone who can walk into the heart of darkness, into the universal human phobia, and walk out unscathed. That's my pops. The bravest, the greatest sheepdog I've ever met, the man that I will spend the rest of my life trying to emulate. A man who knew no fear, a man whose heart had no bounds, the best man ever. My father, he just had this innate sense of wisdom about him, right? He always knew what to do, when to do, and how to do it. He never had to think about what was right. He was so perfect, almost. But I seriously can't remember a time that he was ever wrong. Up until 2 months ago. He and I were driving on Center Street in Provo and we were stopped at a traffic light. He was real sick. He was curled up in a ball in the passenger seat of the truck, and he was shaking. I looked over at him and I said, "Pops, you all right, man? You good?" And he looked at me with the most serious look that he's ever given me. And I saw tears well up in his eyes. And he said, "No, I'm not okay." He said, "This used to be my city. I used to be a sheepdog, but now I'm just a sheep. How am I ever going to protect anybody? What good am I?" And then he started to cry. It's the first time I've ever seen my dad really cry. Pops, if you can hear this, I just want you to know that you were wrong. You were so wrong. If I took every right thing that you have ever said in your life and measured it up against that one wrong thing that you said, it wouldn't even compare. You're the greatest sheepdog a man could ever know. Your kindness towards people and what you would do to protect anybody, at all costs. You were wrong. You will always be a sheepdog. You see, being a sheepdog wasn't something that Pops did. It was who he was, who he is, and who he always will be. It's not easy being Paul Janda's son. Living life on the shoulders of a giant some pretty spectacular views. Views that people at the ground level don't get to see. The experience on such a great giant's shoulders is unmatched. Every good experience I've ever had in my life, every good thing about me, I got from my dad, because he was such a good example to me and to my brothers. And I realize that it's almost impossible to fill the shoes of a giant who left such a big imprint with every step that he took. I spent my whole life trying to be the best that I could so that I could earn my dad's respect. So that I could see myself as a man that was equal to him. And it was very hard. But I realized that it's impossible. Because some people are just so rare, so special, so great. That you just can't be them. But what I did realize is that although I could never be as great as my dad, if I could be half the man that he was, I could hold my head with pride and honor. For any man that is half the man that my dad was, is an honorable man of the highest caliber. You know, today was kind of a real hard day for me. This morning we went and picked up his ashes. And as I picked up his ashes, it was really light. I said, well, I know he didn't weigh a lot, but, you know, this is what a whole entire life feels like. This is what a giant feels like. A larger-than-life person. A man that carried all the weight of the world on his shoulders was no more heavy than a common paperweight. But then I realized, you know, what sits in that urn is not. It's not him. That's a remnants of a great life on earth. That's a remnants of his body. But my dad is the legacy, the spirit that he leaves behind in this room and that he leaves in everybody's hearts. For anybody that ever met my dad will never be the same. Their life will somehow, in one way or another, be better. If it were humanly possible to calculate the actual physical weight of the value of the support, the mentorship, the wisdom, the kindness, the friendship, and the humor, if that were physically possible to weigh, that urn right there would stop the universe from spinning. I want to thank everybody for coming out, and thank everybody for their support. I just hope that everybody here has the same feeling in their heart about my father as me and my brothers do, that he's just an awesome man, unmatched. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So I'm sure a lot of you know I'm Jace, the baby. But I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to those of you who came to show love and support for Pops and our whole family. It means the world to us as times are not so easy right now. Big thank yous to all the brothers and sisters in the police department and fire department for making this service as great as possible and for the familyhood you showed our old man. Special thanks to Katie Smith for organizing and putting up with a group of Jandas as much as you have had to the last few days. That's not an easy task. The last time I spoke in front of a crowd at all was in high school, so forgive me if I get tongue-tied, but there's a million things I could say about Dad. I'm short for words right now, so I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. Words can never really express how much I love him and how much he loved me. He gave me everything and anything I asked for in life, with no hesitation. He taught me how to be a strong-hearted, caring, and loving man. A man who doesn't cast doubt or judgment onto others, because everyone has a life story that's different and also important. He taught me the importance of being a good friend and having good friends. Watching him and Mike Bastion's friendship as I grew up is something I'll always appreciate differently. Those two are really the dynamic duo. Mikey has always been a second father to me and really helped me through the last few weeks. So shout out to Mike. One of my favorite memories is going paintballing when I was a teenager with those two, because they thought they tactically were going to destroy a bunch of 12-year-olds. They didn't. But watching them interact and just have a good time, it was true comedy to watch them. I wish I could have recorded it to show you all today. Pops really showed me the ropes on how to be a good human being in general, and it was always based on actions, which is the most important. He taught me to have a good sense of humor, because it makes everything in life a little bit easier to deal with. With this generational transition, he helped paint the path for me to follow and succeed, which is what being a good father is all about in the end. He was an amazing teacher to the youth, a lot of you adults, I'm in here as well. And the amount of people that have contacted me and reached out to me over the last few weeks with stories of things that he's done that impacted their lives forever is a true testimony to his greatness and accomplishments in life. A true legend, Brother Janda. I couldn't be more proud of my own father. I'll forever cherish and remember all the little and big times we had in life. I hope you know, Pops, everyone here loves you. I hope you rest easy knowing that what you've done on this earth with the time that you were given was enough, even though we're all going to miss you like crazy. I'd like to end this speech with a moment of silence as we play a song I dedicated to him in his memory. Thank you all again for coming.
In preparation for Janda's final call, could the officers with radios please turn them to Ops 4? It'll be Zone 3, Channel 3. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out tonight, and for all those that participated. It's been a great show of what Officer Janda was like through his life, and I've appreciated it. Now, if you'd like to spend some time with sharing stories about Paul or visiting, we got this building for quite a while, so just stand around and enjoy yourself and visit. Thank you.